Hello, hello. Welcome to the Pantheon live stream. For those of you joining live, thank you for indulging me in the playing of that comedy sketch that we released on YouTube last week, just as a bit of a warm up. And for those joining not live, well, welcome. Hello, people of the internet. Steve Persch here. Just one Steve Persch joining in here today, not five. I'm the technical marketing director at Pantheon. Today, we're talking about the intersection of WordPress, scalability, and CDNs. I'm joined here by Pantheon developer advocate, Tearyne Almendariz. Hey, Tearyne, how's it going?
Hey, Steve. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm excited to be doing this. We've talked about live streaming for a while here, and as of right now, we've got 4 of these scheduled through March, and we're gonna have fun, I think, with this first one.
I hope so. I have a little bit of fear about WordPress, but that's why I'm here.
That's all right. I started as a web developer in the WordPress world. Spent a lot of time in Drupal, and then at Pantheon, I'm doing both. And here today, we're going to face one of the fears that's out there that I certainly had when I was getting started as a web developer. And as I went on, I realized how much there is to be afraid of when it comes to scalability, and also like how to get over that fear. So yeah, a fear I commonly had is that, like, okay, if I succeed as a web developer and make a site that's great and people want to visit, and we get so many people visiting the site all at once, what if it's too many people and my website crashes and people get like that dreaded white screen of death or some other unfriendly error message? And so, like, if that's the fear, I gotta ask, like, does that have a grounding in reality? Is there a monster under the bed? And as we'll show on this live stream, yes, sometimes there can be a scalability monster under the bed. Tearyne, have you ever found yourself face to face with the scalability monster?
Yep, I was actually fighting off the 10,000-yard stare because I've dealt with the white screen of death. Because we at one place that I was at, we had a website that was very well done, and we decided, hey, let's invite all 15,000 of our members to sign in all at once via an email campaign. And the site went down, and then there was a white screen of death. And then I don't remember a lot, just a constant ringing of the phone in the background. It's a real
yes. And as we'll discuss later on, like the signing in part can make scalability problems much worse. Like, the details in your case may have been different, but we'll show here in WordPress that scalability can vary greatly, or how you handle scalability can vary greatly depending on whether or not you're talking about people who are logged in or not. To just ground us real quick in what we'll be looking at, Tearyne, how about we bring up the screen share and just like I'm going to show some vanilla brand new installations of WordPress. What we're looking at here is 2 instances of the same basic WordPress site. I spun it up a week or 2 ago. This is running in the Pantheon dev environment. And as you saw there, as I clicked refresh, like, it's taking a couple seconds to load. And this copy of the site on a different subdomain, if I open up a few tabs here, it loads nearly instantly. So what we'll be looking at is like, okay, what's the difference here? What's the difference between the fast one and the slow one? And before I get too far down that road, I just want to say again, like, we're doing both. We're doing this on Pantheon. So if you want to try and follow along live on the live stream, like, you're welcome to do so. Although we're not really structured to like make sure everyone's able to follow along in real time, but you can, if you want to, later on or live if you want, replicate this using Pantheon. You can sign up for a Pantheon account at any time, not pay a thing, try out Pantheon's base level tools, get a dev test live environment where you can play with some of these settings. I happen to be splitting between a dev environment on a brand new unpaid WordPress site and a multi-dev environment. Multi-dev is a great feature that we've got here at Pantheon. So that's what's making it relatively straightforward for me to have a safe sandbox of sorts to break this site, because I'm gonna break the site is already kind of broken. I already slowed it down, but we might break it even more. So we just to ground us here, we've got a site that is slow pretty much every time I load it, and a site that is slow only sometimes when I load it. If I open up another post here, post 13346, I generated a ton of dummy content. That post took a couple seconds to load up. So if I go to the homepage again and I click on another post, we'll see here it's taking a couple seconds to load. But if I open it up again, it's responding near instantaneously. So what's happening, the difference between these two sites is that this one is getting some of the benefits that we want from caching, and this one is not. And we'll be diagramming out the caching part in just a minute here. But some people watching might be asking, like, wait, how did these sites get slow? And the short answer is I feel like I kind of feel like I cheated here, Tearyne.
This is cheating. Is that a sleep function?
That is a sleep function. It feels like cheating. I wanted to demo how to make a site slow. And I made like 13,000 WordPress posts. That was my first attempt. Like, let me just shove as many pieces of content here, try and load them all on the page. Like, let me load 9,999 pieces of content on the homepage. That'll slow it down. It's like, okay, yes, but am I seeing the WordPress part being slow? Am I seeing my browser being slow? And what I want to show is the WordPress part, the part of the website that just generates the response at all. Sometimes that's the part that's slow. So again, we could make that slow by like installing a zillion plugins. But this is just like a very direct one-line way of like, I'm going to make this as slow as I want. 3 seconds. We could say 30 seconds, but that would be obnoxious. So right now it's just 3 seconds of sleeping. And I've got two code editor tabs open up here. One for each environment. And the difference between these two must-use plugins, as they're called in WordPress, which is just a way of loading any arbitrary PHP file, is one of them is, in addition to sleeping for 3 seconds, which is going to make it slow in the first place, it's also setting a random cookie, and it's also don't do that. Don't set literally random cookies. That's dangerous. Again, feels a bit like cheating. There are real world plugins that set cookies for good and bad reasons, but just for the pure clarity of the example, setting an actually random cookie is breaking cache in one way. Another thing doesn't even feel so much like breaking cache. I'm just telling the cache. I'm just telling the cache, no cache, no store. You must revalidate every single request. This is how that slower of the two sites is being slow. It's slow because not only am I telling WordPress to sleep for 3 seconds before it does anything, I'm also saying set a random cookie and really don't cache it. And and in practice, either of these would be enough to break caching significantly. I did both just to like really make sure that I broke it. But really broken. Just like really don't cache it.
Steve, I'm going to take a second here to see if we can't ask our viewers, what are some things that you have done to your WordPress site or any other kind of site that have caused it to slow down? Maybe not these deliberate things that Steve is doing, but let's talk about that. Drop some comments. Let us know.
Yeah, as we asked that, Tearyne, I was just thinking of this was a Drupal project, but the similar problem could happen in WordPress as well. One of the last times I, in a previous job, encountered this style of issue where like I do have a caching layer in front of my website that's making things fast, but when the caching layer is bypassed or when there's just not a fresh cache, then we get all the way to PHP. I found if I'm not careful about like how I configure the the SEO settings. Like in WordPress, the equivalent would be Yoast. I was like, bubbling up the taxonomy terms present on an article, bubbling those up as in Drupal language tokens. I found that by doing the token part in an inefficient way, my site was surprisingly slower, and that's where the slowness came from. So when you're working on Pantheon, if you need to chase down why is it slow in the PHP part, Pantheon has tools for that. New Relic, which, like, if people watching the live stream want to get into that part, we can. I see David in the chat here. Hey, David, good to see you, at least through chat. A plugin inserted literally millions of comments into the database, getting rid of those sped up the dashboard by 10 seconds. Yeah. So yes, that could do it. David, as I was exploring how best to demo this, like, how can I make a WordPress site really slow? Talking about it with other Pantheors, that came up with like, well, you could make like 1 million posts. That would make it slower. And like, okay, yes, but I do want to show something that is like easily, quickly replicable by anyone watching this. And I suppose, like, if you're comfortable with Terminus, our command line tool, and WP CLI, or maybe just the plugin David's referencing, there are ways to make 1 million posts or 1 million comments with relatively little effort. Chris Reynolds here, Pantheon engineer, says post revisions can have a similar result. So it's possible here that we'll need to do a follow-up live stream about, like, okay, what happens if the database is gigantic?
True.
But that's probably not where we'll go here today. Tearyne, how about at this point we switch over to my crayon diagrams?
Yes.
I also last minute decided to bring in this synthesizer for some fun boops and bops.
Nice.
All right, I'm gonna slow fade on the synth, and we've been using a lot of jargon here so far. We talked about PHP, databases, CDNs, and for people watching, some of that jargon might have gone over your head, and at this point, I'm going to ground things in Legos, some crayons, and we will radically simplify some web architecture.
Explain like we're 5.
Exactly. I have a 5-year-old son who's soon to turn 6. I didn't try out this explanation on him. Maybe I should have. My hope is that in radically simplifying things here, I don't say anything inaccurate, just simplified. But if I do say anything inaccurate, I think there's a good chance that that Chris or someone else will pipe up in the chat and correct the inaccuracies. So yes, Chris, it's a live demo with crayons. What could go wrong in a live demo with crayons? I'm sure something. We've practiced this a couple times, but things could still go wrong. So let's take ourselves back to perhaps the simplest version of a WordPress site. So I first started making sites with WordPress in 2006. We've got some imaginary people out here who are going to browse our conversational WordPress site here. I've got me, headless, not as in headless CMS, but headless as in Steve's thumbnail here will provide the head. I'm browsing this website. Someone else over here, maybe in Seattle, is browsing this website. Somebody else in Arizona is browsing this website. And in a simple, yes, famous last words, what could go wrong in a live demo? Lots of things. One thing that did go wrong in a rehearsal is that the software running on this spare phone that does the camera fanciness updated last time I plugged it in. And the interface was different, so that could go wrong again. So in the simple version of the website architecture, John or whoever in Seattle is saying, I want the homepage of the WordPress website. The WordPress site's like, oh, you want the homepage? Let me make the homepage for you. And in a site that has not been artificially slowed down, that's only going to take a couple hundred milliseconds, meaning like 1/5 of a second. half a second would be slow here if it took half a second for WordPress to make the HTML to then send back to our visitor in Seattle. This round trip can add up. And this is just the round trip to get the initial HTML when our person in Seattle says, I want the homepage. Takes a few fractions of a second to get to WordPress, a few fractions of a second for WordPress to make the HTML, and then a few more fractions of a second for that response to get back out. Like, not a huge deal. The internet, the World Wide Web worked good enough in that manner for a decade or two, and everyone visiting the web page in that or the website in that style is living in that world where you're waiting some number of milliseconds for that request and response to come back. If you're really far from the server, the WordPress site that's generating these responses in the first place, you might start to notice, like if you are in Australia and the WordPress site, the database and PHP is running in Iowa, where our Google Cloud presence is, or if it's in Virginia with AWS, like it's going to take a second maybe for that data to transmit from Australia to the United States. And so there's a common pattern for resolving that pain point, and it's called a content delivery network. Basically, what if instead of every single request and response needing to go all the way to the origin server, what if we put something around that site and closer to all the people visiting the site? Call it a content delivery network, data centers all over the world. And then when our first person here requests the homepage, WordPress does need to generate the homepage at least once, send it back. But then after that request and response completes once, WordPress can tell the content delivery network, this is the homepage. I made it for this one person, but this is good for anyone else who asks for the homepage for the next 60 seconds or the next 600 seconds. That's up to you. So, if this person in Arizona asks for it, they may not have to wait very long because the CDN nearby, either in the same state or just closer by, has that cached copy right there. Greatly speeds things up. Tearyne, even though I'm doing crayons here, there's a very good chance that I've lost somebody with still some jargon. I don't know if my literal 5-year-old would have kept up with it.
If he did, just like get him into web development now.
Yeah.
I'm following along.
Cool.
I can see how this works out. I see Reed says.
Yes. So Reed is asking, I was under the impression static assets were held up to a year. So that's a good point, Reed. When the origin server responds to that request, that initial request for a file, it's telling the CDN the maximum amount of time that it could be held. So far, I've mostly just been talking about like the initial HTML response that comes. Like when you ask for the homepage, that HTML response will say, hold this for 60 seconds or hold this for 600 seconds. That HTML response is also going to include links to a bunch of static assets, as you say, like CSS files, JavaScript files, image files. And in the case of Pantheon, a different layer of, I'm not going to draw more layers in here, but there's a different layer of the stack that is setting that bit of metadata to say like, okay, if it's a CSS file, a JavaScript file, an image file, it is far less likely to change at any given time. And so, our default configuration, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I would be surprised if it's a year or something saying like, this is an image file served off of that files directory, site's default files in the case of Drupal, or the WP contents uploads directory in the case of WordPress. Those files are not served from PHP. It's just a different layer of Pantheon passing those along to the CDN and telling the CDN like you can hold on longer to those. All right. So this is a
Now I
way
have a
of.
question.
Oh yes.
So I understand this in terms of if you are doing a website that's like maybe more static, right? Or
Mhm.
even something where it's just hosting a bunch of content. But
Yeah.
in the case of the 15,000 members that I had logging on, the CDN might not necessarily be the solution for that, right? Because that's not
Mhm.
static content being
Yeah.
delivered. Can you
Yeah.
talk about that?
That's a good point. So let me draw in another diagram here. My complex diagram. I'm going to change up the diagram slightly to
Okay.
show I've got WordPress here,
Mhm.
and I'm going to draw a couple more blue boxes to represent
More
the fact that
WordPresses.
uh,
No.
not exactly more WordPresses, but more capacity for WordPress to handle a certain number of requests at the same time. So by default,
Oh.
on Pantheon, like if you sign up for a Pantheon free site right now, like in this
Mhm.
dev environment, uh, you have the capacity to handle at the WordPress level 4 requests simultaneously. And if
Oh.
WordPress is processing these in like 100 milliseconds, you're probably not even going to notice that because 100 milliseconds goes by pretty quickly, and because
Mhm.
there is a CDN surrounding everything. And for most sites that are on like our basic plan, that
Mhm.
CDN is meant to handle the majority of requests and responses.
Mhm.
But if your visitors are logged in, if it's not a site that's primarily unidirectional, if it's a forum-based website or a membership website,
Mm.
then
Mm.
that's the situation where this. If could you bring up the code again real quick, Tearyne?
Yeah.
Or this header of no cache. As I was talking about this header for the first time, I was saying like not exactly breaking the cache. I'm just telling the cache not to cache. Like there are very legitimate reasons to set this header. Like this is you're going to get this header or something very close to it if you're logged in. That's a way of saying, hey CDN, and let's go back to the diagram here.
Mhm.
That's a way of saying, when me, the logged in administrator of this WordPress site, if I'm making a request here and I
Mhm.
now have a dashed line for my CDN. If I
Oh
make a
yeah.
request to WordPress and say like, give me the WordPress administrative screen or even the homepage, like that. If I'm logged in, something about that initial HTML response will be different because I'm logged in as the administrative user. So when
Oh.
WordPress sends the response back to me, it's including that some version of that cache control, no cache, no store, must revalidate sort of header, because it's telling the
Mm.
CDN, like, don't give this to anybody else. Like it would be bad if WordPress generated a homepage for like the super admin user, but then also gave it to people who aren't logged in. And even in the case of
Yeah.
like, a forum website or a membership website, like if you're customizing like a homepage feed for different users, you wouldn't want the homepage response feed getting mixed up between these two people. If it's a
Mhm.
membership kind of website, then yeah, everyone should be going to WordPress for that initial HTML response. The
Mhm.
CSS, the images, probably don't need to be different per user. So read
Mm.
that's part of why those assets we just like set those globally to like very aggressive caching, because there are some conditions under which image files or CSS files would be different per logged in user, but uh, that would be unusual. It's the HTML response that's probably varying per user. So when you have a site like that's where you might need more hardware, more capacity at this level, and Pantheon can handle that kind of capacity adding pretty easily. Like as you move up between our basic plan to a performance small, performance medium, performance large, the main thing that's changing is the number of boxes here, the number of requests that WordPress can handle simultaneously. memory also goes up as you move up to larger and larger plan levels. But the main thing that's changing is the number of requests that can be processed at this level. But for the vast majority of sites, that shouldn't be your primary mode of scaling. The CDN is a far more effective scaler of a website than just throwing hardware at the problem. Although the way we do it at Pantheon, I wouldn't so much call it throwing hardware at the problem. It's more like throwing more capacity at the problem. But the old school way of handling this need is like, let's buy a bigger server and hope it fits in our closet.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's where our server was.
Yeah. So that gets really problematic when this layer is slow. So in our example here, where I've artificially slowed down this site to always taking at least 3 seconds, it can get problematic. And to visualize the way things go bad here, I'm going to bring in even more Legos.
Yay.
So let's imagine that each request and response that's coming in here is a Lego. So again, like the cached behavior that we want is that when Mr. Seattle here asks for the homepage and the CDN doesn't have it, WordPress generates the homepage, sends it back through the CDN, tells the CDN this is the homepage. It's generated for anyone in the public, and you can hang on to this cached version of the homepage for 10 minutes or however many minutes. Mr. Seattle gets the response. When Mr. Arizona or Mr. California requests the same homepage, that response should just be bouncing quickly off of the CDN, like near instantaneously. If, however, the CDN is not giving you that benefit because of a bug, if you've set a cookie without realizing it, then every single request is getting to WordPress here. And if the WordPress part is slow, then you might end up in a situation where this capacity number here, the number of requests that can be handled simultaneously without error, that could become a problem. Because if like in this case, it's taking 3,000 milliseconds for a request to get in and out of one of these boxes, then more and more requests might still be coming in during those 3,000 milliseconds. To a computer, 3,000 milliseconds is a long period of time. So if more requests pile in and it's taking too long for these requests to get back out, eventually we end up in a situation where there's more requests waiting, like inside the CDN, but not yet inside WordPress, that eventually we start to get error messages. And I think we'll jump back over soon to the the screen share to visualize that. But basically what we end up with is more requests than WordPress can handle. And I don't know how many hundreds, or probably hundreds, maybe 1,000-ish Legos I just dumped on here. The CDN would be able to handle this no problem. It's when all of these requests make it to WordPress, which is handling things on the order of hundreds or thousands of milliseconds, that we slow down. The CDN, as we'll see here, switching back over to the screen share, the CDN can handle requests just so much faster. And I see Ryan Marks, another Pantheor, is trying to drop in some emojis or something.
Steve, I got to say that that diagram is starting to look like a Taylor Swift ticket pre-sale line.
Yes, exactly.
You don't know how that turned out.
This is what happens, Ticketmaster. Too many people trying to buy. All right, we'll do, we'll have to do a follow-up Taylor Swift focused one. We probably won't be able to clear the rights to any Taylor Swift song to stream on YouTube. So we'll have to think our way around that problem. All right, back to the screen share here. We again have our two copies of this plugin that are slowing down our sites in different ways. Again, both of them are sleeping for a long time, but only one of them is also setting the cookie and changing the header in a way that totally bypasses the value that we get for caching. And just so that I don't overwhelm myself, I'm going to close some of these tabs. But yeah, let's just remind ourselves the difference in the behavior that we see in these two sites. So,
Steve, I read somewhere that most people, like PHP workers and stuff aside, most people, if their request takes more than 3 seconds, they will absolutely leave your website. So
yes,
scalability matters too.
Absolutely. And, our CTO, David Strauss, I think around the time we added the global CDN, I should bring up my face rather than just the Legos.
We love the Legos. We love you too, Steve.
But yeah, David Strauss, our CTO, uses the metaphor of a starting gun in like a sprint race, like a track and field sort of race. And if we think of the click as the starting gun, what we're seeing between these two sites is the lag time between when does our website even respond to the starting gun. And what we're seeing here is that like the initial response to the starting gun in the case of this website that's not as broken, much less broken, the response to the starting gun is nearly instantaneous. So I'm going to open up Chrome Developer Tools, and I'm going to the Network tab. And what the Network tab will let me do, if I haven't totally lost myself in resizing these different windows so that they're visible enough on the screen share, what the Network tab shows me, among other things, is the amount of time spent waiting. So here's the initial HTML response, and then there are a bunch of other files, CSS files, favicons, PNG files that are needed to be downloaded to make even the simplest of web pages look like a real web page. So that initial HTML response is kind of like the jerking reaction to the starter's pistol. And if that initial reaction to the metaphorical starter's pistol here is fast, well, then you're just in a better position to win that race. And as Tearyne said, if 3 seconds go by or something like that, you are losing the race. So here, even when I do a hard refresh on this less broken site, Chrome thinks Chrome is saying this initial HTML response took only 5 milliseconds. And like, there are 1,000 milliseconds in 1 second. So that is a tiny fraction of a second that my browser had to wait for that initial HTML response. That is very, very fast. So that suggests to me that I, living in Minneapolis, I must be pretty close to one of those CDN data centers. Let's compare that to the response time on this more broken site. I'll make the window a little bit bigger here. And what I expect to find is that we'll see a response time reported in Chrome of many thousands of milliseconds, because every single time I do a hard refresh here, the request is going from my laptop to whatever's the closest CDN point of presence in the Minneapolis area. It might be following some path in the CDN that I can't be entirely sure of, but it ends up inside the Google Cloud Data Center where WordPress is living, where I have this code that says, hey, sleep for 3 seconds. And then it comes back.
Oh, it's full on jump to seconds. Look.
Right. So 3.26 seconds. So that tells me that this 3 seconds of sleeping is making a huge difference. Like if I took that out, we'd be left with 0.26 seconds, which isn't that bad of an initial response time. But that's the diff. This is the scale of difference that we're talking about. And I suppose just for demo purposes, why not? How about I comment this out and do a hard refresh? This is where live demoing gets dangerous, when I go off script. There we go. All right, so 270 milliseconds. Now that I've commented out that sleep for 3 seconds, it's 270 milliseconds for this request and response to go all the way from my laptop to the Google Cloud Data Center, get processed by WordPress, make however many MySQL queries, make some HTML, and send it all the way back. 270 milliseconds. So not awful in the wide world of performance metrics, but if you could have a 5 millisecond reaction to the starter's pistol or a 270 millisecond reaction to the starter, and Chris Reynolds says that's still bad.
It's better than it was.
I was being generous. I was being generous, Chris. It's way better than 3 minutes or 3 seconds and change. But yeah, especially when you see it compared to 5 milliseconds. 270 milliseconds is still bad, but this is just the initial reaction to the metaphorical starter's pistol. For sites that feel really slow, often that slowness is coming from like these JavaScript files or huge image files, and that is often where you may need to start in improving web performance. But I find it helpful to ask, like, okay, are we even reacting to the starter's pistol quickly? Because if we're not, then we're going to have a bad time no matter what. All right, there are a few more details that I want to call out here in developer tools. Let me see if I can make this. There we go. So the first detail that I want to call out is this age header. This is the number of milliseconds that this response has lived in cache. And because this cache control header is saying no cache, no store, must revalidate, it's not cached at all. It has not lived in this in the cache for any number of seconds, because again, this cache control header that I set here is now showing up in Chrome. Whereas over in this this less broken website, if I don't get lost, the age is 149, meaning this response that I got was a cached response, and it had been sitting in the cache for 149 seconds, 2.5 minutes. This response, this cache control header said publicly cacheable. WordPress was telling the CDN this is usable for anyone in the public, and the CDN, could hold on to this cache response for at most 600 seconds. A little bit of a tangent. I've noticed some people interpret max age to mean, hey, CDN, hold on to this response for exactly 600 seconds. That's just that's not behavior that you should count on. You are suggesting to the CDN that it please cache this and do so for no more than 600 seconds. In practice, you could set a very high max age, like you could set a max age of days or months or a year. That doesn't guarantee that the CDN will hold on to it. Like if your web page is only getting 1 hit per month, the CDN might just drop it out of the cache because it's not being used.
We have a question from McKenna. She wanted to know, what's the ideal page load time?
As fast as possible. A very popular tool, McKenna, for measuring performance in the last few years, Google Lighthouse has become the de facto standard, and I'm happy that a company as large as Google has come in with this Lighthouse tool, which is available inside of. Now I'm going extra off script. I'm just gonna for funsies run Lighthouse. So it's built into Chrome, which is a big part of why Lighthouse has become popular. Also, just the ubiquity of Google, and hey, not too bad. This is become a very common, or even just the de facto way of measuring whether or not performance is good enough. So with a bare bones WordPress site where all I've done to it is add a couple of debugging plugins and a ton of posts, the performance score is very good. The accessibility score is very good. SEO, not so good. I did not add Yoast to this plugin. That might be why the SEO score is bad. Actually, I'm going to guess that another reason the SEO score is bad is because this is an unpaid Pantheon multi-dev. I'm guessing we're getting dinged for the fact that robots.txt. Robots.txt is valid, but it's telling the crawlers to stay away. All right, that's too much of a tangent. Now I want to know. Yes, page is blocked from indexing. Yes, it's blocked from indexing by robots.txt and by a different network tab, or I should say a different HTTP header that is visible in the network tab. If you're on a Pantheon multi-dev environment or dev environment, we are setting this header that says no index, meaning like Googlebot or Bingbot. Now that Microsoft has AI built into Bing, I feel like more people are going to pay attention to what works well for Bing. That's a tangent on a tangent. But in any case, we're setting this header here to make sure that like your dev environment isn't getting picked up by Google, which overall is a good thing, but it shows up in that lighthouse score. All right, Tearyne, I feel like I'm 3 tangents deep here.
Well, we have another question about how CDNs
Yeah.
work. Chris talked about it a little bit, but Reed was asking, for logged in users, is there a particular default time that the AG CDN before they're automatically logged out, or is it a different concept?
Short answer, that's a different concept. I think that has like more to do with the cookie that is used to log you in, and as if I say something incorrect, I'm sure Chris will correct me. But yeah, it's the cookie expiration time, and like as you interact with the CMS, the response that comes back from the CMS would be continuing to set the cookie if you have not configured it to not continually set the cookie.
I've set a lot of cookies as a front-end developer, and especially working in finance. Making sure that the right people were logged into the right places is very critical.
Yeah. So a couple additional headers that I want to call out. This ext served by header is useful for seeing, if you ever need to, which data center in the CDN is actually giving you the response. So as I mentioned, I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. MSP here is indicating that is a shorthand for Minneapolis, St. Paul. That's indicating that this response came from the Minneapolis, St. Paul area data center, and it got its response from one of the Chicago data centers. I think there are now multiple data centers in a few cities like Chicago. This other header that I want to call out is the X timer header. This is useful for confirming whether or not a slowness problem is inside of the application or not. So what this header is telling me is first it's telling me the Unix timestamp that this request started at. I think S just stands for start here. Fastly, our CDN uses Varnish internally. And I think that the VS and the VE here just indicate when Varnish started processing this request and ended processing this request in milliseconds relative to this timestamp here. So what this is telling me is that this response, which again was cached, it was reaching max age, but it had not yet hit max age. It was a hit, and the CDN spent only 1 millisecond finding the cached response. And it's actually rare that I even see 1 here. I usually see 0 here, meaning like rounding down to 0 milliseconds is the amount of time that the CDN takes to respond. And to switch camera views again. That, in short, is why the CDN is just so much more effective as a scaling mechanism, because to brush aside these Legos, fast or slow at the CDN level is measured in like single digit milliseconds, whereas fast or slow in the WordPress area is measured more in like hundreds of milliseconds, maybe even thousands of milliseconds if it's super slow. But it's just an order of magnitude or two different in how fast these things can respond. That's what makes the CDN so much more effective. It's one of the things that makes the CDN so much more effective as your primary mode of scaling. And in the decade plus since I first became aware of CDNs, they've gone from like an aspirational thing that only the highest budget projects could afford it. I think the first time I saw a presentation on CDNs, it was in the context of someone talking about I'm now questioning if I could even mention a well-known tech / car company was able to afford a high-priced CDN. I was like, oh yeah, that's the kind of project that would be able to afford a CDN back in 10 plus years ago. When Pantheon added a CDN for every single site on Pantheon, including these dev environments that we're looking at, we thought we should just be raising the expectations for websites in general. It's now just expected that practically any website on the internet, if it's a professional website, will get this kind of a benefit. And that's what we want for every single site on Pantheon. And one of the reasons we're doing this live stream is because there are still some ways you can unintentionally break it. But if you are out there and feeling like CDNs have been out of reach because configuring them yourself is hard, that the projects that I worked on before I was a Pantheon employee, where I did have to understand the CDN level, I spent most of that time thinking, man, this is not my area of expertise. I have much more expertise in Drupal and WordPress, and the details of CDNs are just their own rabbit holes that, like, at a brass tacks level, might not be worth your billable hours. Like
I know that for me, like I do admit to having like a bias of being a Drupal developer. And part of it is because I was concerned about, scalability issues with WordPress sites and, they were just built to do blogs. How are they ever going to handle anything? But from this, I'm seeing that there are multiple ways that WordPress sites can handle their scalability issues. Like if they're on a performance platform like Pantheon, from having more PHP workers to having a CDN, and then the difference between like which experience is that good for. So I think this has been really, really insightful for me. I might try to do some WordPress development. Knock on wood, don't hold me to
it. I mean, you and anyone else can spin up a free account on Pantheon, get those dev test live environments. If you're at the gold account tier on Pantheon, then you get those multi-dev environments, which you saw me using. That makes it even faster and easier to spin up disposable sites, break them, and if you break them so bad that you just want to throw them away, it's very easy to throw away a multi-dev. It's even easy to throw away an unpaid sandbox site that you're only using for learning purposes. So yeah, if CDNs feel like something you want for your website, but also something you don't want to be entirely responsible for, that's the kind of value that Pantheon wants to bring.
Plug in the website. Yes. If you want to try it out, you can go to /register.
All right. I feel like we're nearing the end here, but I just want to make sure we haven't missed anything in the chat. Chris Reynolds says server-side caching makes a big difference too for WordPress performance. If you don't have a CDN, yes. So perhaps on a future stream, Chris, we should go deep dive into the object caching. That's valuable for like we kind of glossed over like that membership use case. Okay, well, what do you do in that case other than just like throwing hardware at the problem or just horizontally scaling? Object caching is a big part of what can make that architecture or that use case more scalable, more performant. And that's that's also one of the things that was first built into the Pantheon platform. Like, let's just give Redis to the sites that need that level of caching. Chris says that he'd love to talk about object caching. All right, Chris, we'll add that to the backlog of ideas. And Chris, let's get you on the live stream soon to talk about it. Coming up on our live stream schedule, we're alternating this YouTube live stream with our long-standing Zoom-based office hours. So if you want to just come and ask Tearyne and I questions in a regular Zoom, you can do so at this same time slot next week. After that, in 2 weeks, we'll be back on YouTube talking again about WordPress and the CDNs. We'll be talking about, okay, what happens when the content changes, which is not something we really got into here. What happens when the content changes? How does the CDN know that the content changed? Pantheon has an answer for that. And later on in March, Tearyne, anything you want to say about local development to bring people back in a month to hear about local development?
We'll be talking about the offline experience of being a developer, but how local development tools and environments can help you and your teams to work a whole lot better together. It improves communication. It lets you do a lot of experimenting, not on your dev site or your test site or the live site, as I found. I found out a lot of things when I was a junior developer. I wish I had Lando or DDEV in my back pocket.
Me too.
I'm gonna switch topics. We have a question from Tyler.
Yes.
So he says, let's say he has a properly cached page, which has JavaScript that makes a request into an uncacheable controller to fetch and return data. Under a heavy load, will the CDN continue serving the cached page normally?
I would expect so. We could certainly try to contrive a scenario where that happens and just see. But my expectation would be, yes, like if what we're talking about here is cached pages that then make, for instance, REST requests, like the WordPress REST API. First, I would question, could those be cached too? It depends. It depends on if they can be cached. But that's worth asking. Is it appropriate to cache those REST API responses that can come from WordPress too? The plugin that we'll be talking about in greater detail in 2 weeks, Pantheon Advanced Page Cache, that handles that scenario of content changing and updating caches. I know that it handles the case of the REST API, so I know those REST API responses can be cached. However, like there are certainly scenarios where you might not want those cached. But even if the reason you might not want to cache them is, oh, I want those updated as soon as possible, like that's what the plugin is meant to handle. But even if you're thinking like, oh, I'd only want it to be cached for like 3 seconds. Well, even 3 seconds is better than not caching at all. Like in prepping for this session, I found that like, oh, if I set the max age to 0, but then still have it set to be publicly cacheable and then flood the site with requests, I'll get cached responses because the CDN will perceive that flood of requests as all coming at the same time. So even a max age of 0 combined with public caching will get you some benefit. I wouldn't recommend doing that on a real website because that's just confusing to say this is publicly cacheable, but only for 0 seconds. Like if you're in that scenario where you want a very low cache, I'd say like, okay, how about 1 second or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5? But even there, I'd say come back in 2 weeks and see how Pantheon Advanced Page Cache works, and then ask if that's really necessary. All right, well let's wrap it up there. I don't think we got any more questions. Tearyne, thanks so much for running with me here today.
Yeah, thanks for being on and explaining all of this. And I even doing this for like what, 7, 8 years. I'm going to date myself in a minute. I learned a lot about the CDN and caching. So thanks so much. And we'll see y'all in 2 weeks or next week.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye, y'all.